Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. While tier lists are one way to choose a main for Season 2, I wanted to talk about some of my own thoughts and opinions for the healers that I'm going to be playing in Season 2, my goals for them, and why I think that they're fun, as well as the healers I'm not going to play, and what I'd like to see out of them. Okay? It should come as no surprise, of course, that I'm going to be maining Priest, but I'm very excited to see the tier set bonuses for Priest because they finally actually feel like tier sets again. And I've been playing the game for a crazy long time. My first cutting edge was like Siege of Orgrimmar, and I've had every cutting edge since. Now, for me, it finally feels like tier sets are changing gameplay or sort of growing your gameplay in interesting ways, especially with the new talent system. So for a while, I was really low on like Holy Priest's tier set, which is super Prayer of Mending synergistic. You're like, yeah, you cast one Prayer of Mending and has a chance to sort of split off and cast an extra one sometimes. Like, yeah, whoop-de-doo. But after doing a lot of the Dragonflight dungeons, I think at this point, I've probably put in like 30 or 40 hours just only of Holy Priest M+ on the PTR. And I am absolutely loving a really Prayer of Mending dominant build for keys. Because it actually feels satisfying to have your Prayer of Mendings sort of maintained and jumping all over the place whenever heavy damage is going out. In fact, it feels a lot better when you're taking certain talent points that are not just hyper fixated on like single target or having to cut through like dead talents that are just kind of crappy, like buffing renew, just to be able to take like damage. So the build that I'm playing with is like a lot of Prayer of Mending, Benediction, synergistic stuff that travels down to Burning Behemoths and results in quite a bit of extra damage. In fact, I was doing equal damage to disc throughout my PTR runs with exact same builds, almost exact same gear and everything like that. So I'm overall really excited to see where Holy Priest is going to end up. And for a while, I think Holy Priest has been kind of just bland almost in dungeons, and this feels so much more interesting that you're playing around bouncing the Prayer of Mendings and trying to be as efficient as you can with them and trying to refresh them before they expire from trash pull to trash pull. And part of the reason it ends up being so good for these new dungeons is there's a lot of steady damage that's happening throughout Dragonflight Season 2. I, overall, am way higher on these dungeons than I was for the Season 1s. There's still some bugs, there's still some bosses that need to be tuned down. I'm sure there's going to be some that stop people on day one, because of course they will. There is a bit of that Blizzard polish that's lacking for some of the mechanics, in terms of just things that are punishing you. But in general, the amount of damage that is going out for these dungeons feels good. The boss mechanics themselves feels like you're actually standing a chance. You're not going to have any Hirsha that's going to target somebody with the circle. They get hit by the circle, and then instantly she arcing lights them instead to like double tap finish them off. Those things don't exist in Season 2. And it's, oh my god, just such a relief to be able to deal with it. Even some of like the harder healing checks, you know what to expect going forward. And for disc as well, oh my god, I'm shocked to find that my mana efficiency as a disc priest in a dungeon is better than a Holy Priest. It's weird. It is really weird, but it's immensely satisfying that I can actually utilize Shadow Covenant as a damage cooldown. I can use it as a healing cooldown, and I can be aggressive with my resources. Hell, I can even apply Renew every now and then in dungeons, which I usually didn't do. But then I want to make sure I'm saving and holding my Radiances, especially when they're instant cast from the 4 set and reduced mana cost, so I can use it as a spot heal and an atonement applicator. And I can sort of jump between those abilities, and the uses, I should say, of those abilities. It feels immensely satisfying that tier sets are finally sort of bringing that to us. For quite a while, whether it was like Azerite gear or Covenants and all the other nonsense that we had, or Season 1's tier sets, we didn't really feel like these pieces of gear were providing enough, in my opinion, of a difference in our gameplay without, you know, reinventing the wheel on us. And so I'm immensely satisfied to see how those tier sets are really going to be impacting us. And so obviously, it should come as no surprise that Disc and Holy are going to be played quite a lot for me. In a raid, oh my god, Holy Priest has like 20-something%, if not more, of its output just derived from hitting Prayer of Mending on cooldown, which is a little annoying, having so much of your healing coming from just one source that's all passive. On the other hand, it is very satisfying that your Holy Words hit like trucks, that it feels like you're constantly getting them back and being able to crank them up again, so I can't complain too much. I'm a little worried about Disc with how much you're getting pushed to like spend lots of mana and spend lots of atonements to be able to crank output, when previously we had these days where your atonement output was really high and you would only ramp when it was really needed. So I suppose that's part of the power creep, but I do think a lot of the raids that we're going to be facing up against are going to be mass healer checks. I think I've talked before about how like Rashok is like this huge healer fight, as we talked about in our previous video for raiding. But overall, I think a lot of these encounters are going to hit hard, challenge healers, and I hope that we're going to see an almost equal amount of like 5 heal fights as we would to 4. But enough about my main. I wanted to talk about my alts. So for Season 1, I ended up playing Monk and Evoker as like my primary alts. Pushed a little bit of score, but I never really sat there and tried to like grind out high keys super hard on either of them because Season 1 just kind of burned me out. Playing with crazy amounts of affixes where I felt like I'm constantly playing up against the affix where I'm killing 4 explosive orbs in a row, and then by the time that I finish killing all of them, 3 more spawn and I kill all of them, and then I gotta interrupt something, dispel something, whatever. It just was a nightmare. It was not fun. And I'm really, really glad that I don't have to deal with explosive, at least for one season. Beyond that, it feels very satisfying with the new affixes in the dungeons, where they sort of appear a little bit every once in a while. It's like every 30 seconds. It's almost like quaking. It's like, oh, they're here. Okay, I've dealt with it. Okay, I can like work on the dungeon itself and focus on actual content that I'm doing and not constantly battling affixes for my life or soloing affixes as well, because a lot of the new affixes are things you have to have the entire team play around. You know, even if you have some situations where the DPS won't go out of their way to dispel an afflicted mob or something and you'll heal it up, and there's those crucial moments where you say, hey, I need help, and then hopefully having like a prop pally in your group or something will allow that opportunity to say, oh, hey, they are able to help you out. And honestly, if you have like a tank that's able to dispel, it's super satisfying when you're able to have them dispel one and you dispel one and you get into a nice flow. It's great. That said, I don't really think I'm going to play much Evoker next season. I'm really kind of dissatisfied with Evoker after Season 1, particularly in a dungeon environment where it feels like my damage rotation is just kind of whatever. Especially when I'm comparing it to like other healers. Even as goofy as it sounds, I actually find Mistweaver more satisfying when I'm like spinning crane kick spamming and doing a ton of healing and damage at the same time, or have my Fey line down and I'm like single targeting with like the double tapping Tiger Palm into blackout kicks. It just feels way more satisfying than these really slow, tedious living flame casts. And so dropping the set bonuses from Season 1 for Evoker kind of just turning me off to playing it, especially with the news of like more Blossom stuff. I think the spec's going to perform really well for the raid. I think it's going to perform well in high keys. But I don't think that this gameplay that it's bringing to us is enough to really convince me or push me to like want to main it really badly. And so I think I'm going to be giving Shaman a try as my third character for Season 2. For one, because it's going to be strong. But for another, they've done a really good job of how the talent builds start breaking down. And I feel like I'm only kind of scratching the surface because I played some in beta and then I played a little bit here in Season 1 as I've been gearing it up and I've done some rating on it. But I'm really excited to start diving into it more as an alt. And maybe as something I'm going to push more high keys for, depending on where the meta for M+ is going to bring. Because of the fact that it feels like there is a decent amount of like depth with it. And they have a really good way of being able to put out easy damage with things like Acid Rain. You can get your damage out or get the majority of your damage out, and then you could focus on healing if you need to heal. Then you could focus on adding damage if you need to damage. And I think those things, for one, with Evoker, it's like, yeah, you have your Fire Breath, you have your Deep Breath, you have a couple big cooldowns you're able to play around, and then it just becomes like spamming one button. I'm just over it at that point. There doesn't seem to be enough of like diversity in terms of how you're dealing damage to contribute to your group. And I feel like Shaman should at least be a little bit more fun on that end. And when it comes to the healing side, I've always really enjoyed with Shaman how you're able to like build, store up healing out of Cloudburst, synergize it with Ancestral Guidance, which you did back in the day. So much back when I was playing like a Legion Shaman or something. I had a great time with how bursty the spec felt. And I'm overall super excited because it seems like from what I've been looking at from other players, Shaman's kind of getting back to this point where Cloudburst feels very satisfying, very bursty, and has like that sort of pop to it. And in addition, Chain Heal absolutely slaps. So I feel like even when I was doing this low-key dungeon with Court of Stars, I felt like I was actually doing something. And while I was still picking up the mechanics and still getting used to the totems and the new cooldowns of Dragonflight, I still actually feel like I'm able to contribute to my group even when like under-geared. And I feel like I have resources and cooldowns to be able to rely upon even when I'm under-geared. Overall, I think for my goals with Season 1, I completed them. I finished the raid tier. This was actually the first raid tier since my guild fell apart mid-prog. This is actually the first raid tier since like literally Siege of Orgrimmar, where I didn't prog on the end boss, which is a very odd point. But with how Vault of the Incarnates kind of shaped up to be, with Raszageth being the Titan boss, this just massive boss that took as much pulls as the rest of the instance, kind of don't miss it. At least I didn't feel like I missed out so much by not progging on Raz. But I absolutely am like really excited about Season 2, because Season 2's raid looked really sloppy at the start. I mean, some bosses were just chaining abilities so quickly together that they would have voice lines every single time they did something. And they've done a really good job, to their credit. They've done a really good job of actually fixing those things, correcting them, and putting together a much more polished raid than I was expecting after the first couple raid tests. Because back when I raided in Imperative, back when I raided in Future, we were always raid testing, so you sort of got a feel for how these bosses were looking. And I was pretty doomer about Season 2, I'll admit, after the first few tests that we had. But now, especially after they made the 25% health and damage change for healers, especially after they reworked some fights, I think we tested like Zaskarn like 3 different times. We tested Rashok a couple different times as well. I'm very excited for what it's going to hold. I'm still very worried about Sarkareth not being tested. I'm still not a fan there. But man, I'm very excited for Season 2 in a much bigger way than I was really expecting. Because a lot of times, you know, you have like your Sanctum of Domination, you have for like Battle for Dazar'alor, you have these middle sort of raid tiers that are kind of whatever, they're fine. But man, overall, as long as Sarkareth's going to be a good fight, I think we're in for probably one of our best mid-tier expansions that we've had in quite a while. And I'm more excited that the talent trees actually feel like they've built up some more depth to it. I was even watching like my old beta VODs and looking at the first iteration of these talent trees and just how far we've come in like less than a year. So overall, Dragonflight, it didn't have the weird start of having all this nonsense you had to deal with at the beginning, like in Legion, where it was just trying to overcome the artifacts and trying to grind enough artifact power to actually be successful. It doesn't have the chores to it, but it definitely lacked this weird sort of bit of polish, and I think that they've kind of found it in Season 2. So my hope is that I'm going to be able to get through the whole tier, grind through all of our progress and everything like that with my new guild Incarnate, or my new old guild, because I joined a guild that had some buddies of mine from 5 years ago. The guild's still running, and there's like 7 or 8 people there I used to raid with back in the day who are still there, which got me hella excited. And I'm at a point where I really just want to do dungeons again for the sake of running dungeons. And near the middle or end of Season 1, I just wasn't really at that point. And of course, I'm eager to hear what you guys are saying for your setup as well. If you haven't checked out the Patreon, be sure to do so if you want to support some more of the awesome content that we're going to be working on. We should have our Dragonflight guides for Holy and Disc Priest out very soon, so look for those on the horizon as well. Wanted to give a special shout out to our special anonymous Naru, thank you so much, our highest tier, as well as Fourth Crow, John, Stephanie, Thoreker, Corey, Calderon, Simon, Sek, Kevro, and Murrow for supporting the Patreon nice and early. Thank you so much, guys, for all the support. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the videos. And like I said, right around the corner will be our 10-1 guides for Holy, Disc, Raids, and Dungeons. Thanks, guys.